Well, hi again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of 100 Yards of Football. I'm Harper LaBelle, pleased to be with you today. And today's show is Take 5 with Stephen Travers. We've got Stephen with us. Logan Landers is our producer and engineer, and welcome to the show. We want to get our last little bit of college football conversation in. And Stephen, I know you got to watch the game, a lot of comments on that. But first and foremost, was it a game that you felt like, you know what, I'm going to stop what I'm doing. I'm going to make sure that I treat this like a Super Bowl type broadcast? Was it just, ho hum, another game? First and foremost, how was your watching pleasure? Were you in your favorite comfortable chair? Were you at a friend's house? What was the college football championship like for you?
No, I watched it on my own, but I did enjoy it. It was as a Trojan, which I obviously am attired today. It was two traditional rivals of USC playing against each other. So I could see why there might be some USC people who didn't care that much about watching Woody Hayes' old team against Ara Parseghian's old team. Certainly back in the day, USC took care of business against both those programs when John McKay and John Robinson and Pete Carroll were there, but those days are long gone. But nevertheless, I'm a college football fan, and it was an excellent game. It really was. It looked like the Buckeyes were going to run away with it the way they did against Oregon a couple of weeks ago. But you really got to hand it to the Fighting Irish. They had a lot of fight in them, and they rallied. They rallied beautifully, and they made a beautiful pass to tie it, and then managed to have two-point conversions to turn basically, I think, a 3 or 4 score differential into a 1-score differential. And you could see the Ohio State fans were squirming, and Ryan Day was squirming. And so Marcus Freeman really had his team playing up, and they were in it right to the end, right to the very end. Will Howard came through with an unbelievable long pass. Going back, you guys like me for my history. It reminded me of a pass from James Street, the father of Houston Street, who was a relief pitcher for the Oakland A's and the Texas Longhorns. James was also a baseball player as well as a quarterback for the 1969 national champion Texas Longhorns. And they were in a 4th and a short situation against Notre Dame in the 1970 Cotton Bowl. And those guys threw about 5-6 passes a game. It was woo-woo Worcester and the wishbone. And he went deep to a guy named Cotton Spirer, who must have looked at him with bug eyes when he called the play in the huddle, like, we don't even practice that play here. But they did it, and they completed it and got it down. And that was what got them into a position to win that game. That's what Will Howard did in a 3rd and I'm not sure I think he had about 11 yards to go. 3rd and 11, and long pass to get it down to field goal position. That's really what did it, because they had the time on their hands to run down the clock, and they were close enough to kick a field goal, and they did kick the field goal. They didn't take any big chances, and that was it. But boy, if they don't make that 3rd and 11, so Will Howard, you got to hand it to this guy who was, quarterback at Kansas State, comes in on the transfer portal. Who is Will Howard? But he had a spectacular season for the Buckeyes. Ryan Day, as I've said before, had his team prepared as a playoff team. They were playing the Moneyball situation, and they carried it all the way to the championship, which Vincent said they would do, and I felt they would do, and I think we all favored Ohio State throughout this process.
Well, one of the things that really impressed me is the amount of people who are all saying that Jeremiah Smith, and obviously he's the recipient of that big play to keep it really the offense going on the field and pretty much ice it. hands down, he's one of the guys that you would say he is NFL ready. He looks the part. He plays the part. He doesn't seem to let anything get to him yet. He's humble, at least right now he is. But he's in a great program. And Quinshon Judkins had a great game. You mentioned Will Howard, the defense, although there wasn't any one particular standout, in my opinion. I'm thinking they played lights out because every one of the guys had 5, 6, 7 tackles, which is perfect for what you would want to coordinate. Everybody has an equal share in this. What an impressive roster.
Well, I think, what did they say? A $20 million roster?
Best team money can buy is how I said it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's the best. It's like Craig Fertig we were talking about this old ball player, played for the Trojans, became a referee, and goes, "Oh yeah, he's the best referee money can buy." but yeah, I mean we're looking at pro football, and nobody, for many, many years, really all my life, it's always been, a known thing that you're looking at professional players, certainly the top guys. I mean, I was looking at a podcast with Clay Matthews, and I think Matt Willig and a couple of other guys who played at USC in the 2000s. And Matthews was saying, nobody gave me anything. I didn't get a thing. He came on as a walk-on and made his way later. Leinart, Bush. They were talking about this. I didn't know. I knew Reggie had a house in San Diego. Apparently, he had one in Malibu. So,
I thought it was West LA, but maybe he's got a Malibu home as well.
Well, they were saying, I heard Malibu, so
yeah,
maybe he had one in, Westwood over by UCLA, just to lord it over them a little bit. I don't know.
Well, you mentioned Clay the third. Now, Clay, he's the long ponytailed Matthews. He was a 185-pound walk-on linebacker from Westlake Village, where his parents live, and I played with his dad. Mm-hmm. And he hit the weight room, and boy, did he hit it hard. About 55 pounds later in 4 years, even going into his senior year, he hadn't been a starter yet, and he earned it. So yeah, there wasn't a whole lot waiting for him in terms of the reaping the benefits of being a Trojan player, other than just I'm on the team.
Yeah, that always surprised me a little bit, coming from his lineage. I don't know if you knew his mom. Did his father marry a very petite girl or something? You would have thought someone who came out of Bruce and Clay Matthews lineage would have the size of a Matthews, but he did. But it was a late bloomer. He put it on the weights and maturity.
Well, you mentioned his wife's name, his mother's name, and Clay's wife is Leslie, and you used the word petite. She raised 4 boys and a girl, so the 4 boys who are always part of the Matthews, I think, Thanksgiving fight. It's not the competition. It's the whole family's going to fight. They're gonna get into a brawl. So I don't know if petite is the right word. She was a tough mom and needed to be with those guys. Yeah, Casey played in the NFL, but again, you mentioned the lineage, but in terms of the SC stuff, how that's breaking down, and we may want to go into that a little bit later on. It's how does the backup wide receiver stay happy when the starter is making 10 times the amount of money? And we're just seeing the beginning of we're all getting along because we can, but how is that going to change over the next few years? We see the beginnings of this right now between the Ohio State and Notre Dame teams.
Yeah, well, when you were playing in the NFL, there were players making multiple millions of dollars, and there were other players who were making minimum rookie salaries or much smaller salaries. In professional baseball, the same thing, especially in the minor leagues. You have bonus babies. The way it works in the minors is the bonus babies, whenever you go out to dinner, they get stuck with the check. Or the other thing that happens is a lot of times a major leaguer will come down to a minor league team for a rehab assignment. They'll be injured and they'll get a start or two. down in the minors, could be a pitcher, could be a hitter. And they also, the tradition is for that guy on his last day to take the team out to the best restaurant in town, which is often a Hardee's or an Arby's, but and pay for the meal, and pay for the drinks.
Yep. The great reward, isn't it? That the great reward of either passing through or ending up at the beginning of your single, double, or AAA experience. Some great plays all throughout this football game. Obviously, Notre Dame gave it their valiant try to get back within it. They have a doink field goal. They've got opportunity there near the end of the game to get within, a single score and a chance to tie it, but it was all for naught. Your takeaways in terms of Ohio State's the ruggedness that anybody would have to go through in this tournament now. 4 difficult games. Tennessee, Oregon, they kind of wiped the floor with Oregon, weren't really challenged. And then they get to Texas. And then we having to rev it up all over again with a few injuries and blah, 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 and being able to do it. They really are pros, aren't they? They're doing it just like the end of a professional season, trying to get into the playoffs.
Yeah, there's no question about it. Now, Quentin Braidhouse, is that the name? The Notre Dame wide receiver?
Jaden Greathouse. Yeah.
Notre Dame wide receiver. Okay.
What a great game he had.
Yes, he made a catch with the Buckeye draped all over him. He had no business making the catch. It was pass interference was called, but it wasn't needed. And I was, as I'd mentioned to you earlier, that reminded me of Jeff Samardzija, who I'm sure you remember was a great All-American wide receiver at Notre Dame around 2004, 2005. And during that epic 2005 Irish Trojan game at South Bend, he could not be stopped. And they really covered him. They double-teamed, triple-teamed him, and he was making catches over his shoulder. It was like Willie Mays making the catch at the Polo Grounds, only with 3 football players draped all over his body. And so that reminded me of Samardzija, and it reminded me of a story some years back. I think it was 2013, and Billy Beane, the general manager of the A's, made a trade to pick up Samardzija in the middle of the season to help the team. The team was in first place, and they were in contention. And Samardzija was an outstanding relief pitcher with the Chicago Cubs. And because he didn't go into the NFL, he could have played in the NFL, but he had a very strong MLB career. He had been a closer, and then they made him into a starter, and the A's used him as a starter. And I texted Billy, and I don't know if you know this, but Billy Beane is a huge USC football fan. Grew up in Southern California. He was an outstanding high school football player, had a chance to go to Stanford to play 2 sports, which is alluded to in Moneyball. And obviously he didn't. And that's all part of the theme of that movie, his regrets over doing that. Well, we were talking about, so I texted and I said, hey, Billy, don't let Samardzija know that you're a USC football fan, because we're going to need him, we being the Oakland A's, we're going to need him to be fired up to play for you, because he could take us to the promised land, this being the 2013 season. And he goes, don't I know it? I'm not going to say a word about that 2005 game or any of that. If he wants to bring it up, but I'm not wearing any SC garb. I might even, wear some green and gold the rest of the season, which of course are the A's colors. They're basically Notre Dame colors. And he did have a good second half for the A's that year. Unfortunately, they ran into Justin Verlander and the other Max Scherzer, and they were just too tough to overcome in the playoffs. But Samardzija was a heck of a pitcher. He was a big, tall guy. You could see his size there, and obviously as good a wide receiver as I've ever seen in college. I mean, really. I've seen them all. Paul Warfield, Lynn Swan, Randy Moss. Boy, he was as good as anybody. He probably just figured, well, I can get to the big leagues in baseball, and you're likely to have fewer injuries, not just career injuries, but life injuries. And I think he made a smart move, but he could have played for anybody as an all-pro wide receiver.
Yeah, the fact that I think him staying close to quote unquote his home in the Midwest and going to Notre Dame and just being within an hour or so, depending on traffic, of playing in Wrigley and being a Cub really was a blessing for him in disguise. Even though the Cubs struggled mightily, he was one of those guys that he got to throw quite a bit, didn't he? He had a great career. Let's put it that way. Just he had a great career.
Yeah, an excellent career. I mean, I've made that trip from Chicago to South Bend and back. It's an interesting trip. But yeah, I mean, Chicago is Fighting Irish town. It's as much a Notre Dame town as Los Angeles is a USC town, if not more.
Yeah,
big time.
Well, Jaden Greathouse had a terrific game. 6 receptions, a couple of touchdowns, and obviously was an added jolt of energy and influence there with the Irish to make it closer. And Logan, obviously the game itself would look a little bit further apart. There were times where, it was a complete domination by Ohio State, but I really appreciate and value the never quit in Notre Dame and their ability to do everything they can with an inferior lineup to make it as close as they could. But obviously, the Buckeye talent level showed itself early and often.
Yeah, it was. I mean, honestly, it was that second quarter that did the Fighting Irish in, right? When you put up 21 points against a really good defense. And, like you said, credit to Notre Dame for coming out, and they actually outscored Ohio State in the second half by a little bit. So they made their adjustments at halftime, but it was just a little bit too little too late, unfortunately. But they showed some great fight, because going into halftime, a lot of people thought, okay, well, this might be it. This might be heading towards a blowout. Ohio State, they looked great in that second quarter, obviously, and Notre Dame, they didn't put up any points on the board in that quarter. So you thought, all right, well, it's 21-7, still not, blowout quite yet, but it seemed to be teetering that way, we'll say. But I thought that overall, that you mentioned Jaden Greathouse, he was a big factor on offense, but Riley Leonard had a really good game as well. He kept it clean in the pocket, no interceptions. I feel like his performance got kind of overlooked, obviously, since they didn't win the game, but I thought that Leonard looked great overall as well.
A lot of folks played well, but again, from the Irish perspective, you hit it dead on, Stephen, when they couldn't get a first down for 2-3 possessions up until halftime, and Ohio State was responding with touchdowns to the punts that Notre Dame was having. You could kind of see the air that was in the balloon when they scored that first touchdown with the opening drive, and they have pictures of Riley's mom up in the stands and then the band playing and everybody else really just having a great time. And look where we are. The Irish are here. And it got quiet before halftime to where everybody was just kind of, okay, well, never mind. I just spent $1,200 on tickets here.
Oh, I heard 2,000.
Well, my brother actually was going to try to go with his son, and he said the night before there was a website that you could go to here in Atlanta. It was $2,000 on Sunday night. Mm-hmm. Monday morning, he went back to the same site, and it was $4,000 for the same ticket. So obviously, someone wanted to double their money, double their pleasure, and have double make gum. But all in all, Stephen, what were your thoughts of either the program in itself, the game, the way that it was all put together? Was that something from a business perspective that the NCAA with this new 12-team tournament, we don't know how long that's going to be in place, but do you think they got enough of it right to where you go, this was a pretty good demonstration right here of what we should be expecting to see here in the next few years?
Yeah, I have a few takes on that, and I don't know whether you had the same experience as I do with my, I don't have cable, I have DirecTV. First of all, it was a very exciting tournament. It was a really, really great football tournament. And it lived up to expectations. You had a couple of, sort of mid-level teams that made it. It was nice to see Arizona State get their shot, and they actually played well. And Boise had their shot. But for the most part, it was, the Southeastern Conference and the Big Ten Conference, easily the two best conferences. You had, the old Pac-12, shoot a couple of guns in there. They didn't get very far, but at least there was some representation. There was a lot of geographical representation. The production value of the television production was excellent. I thought the announcers were very good. I didn't see any major faux pas or anything like that. However, there was one thing that I see, and I don't know if you get this, you or Logan get this on your provider, but I recently switched over to DirecTV, and I'm happy with DirecTV. It is a streaming service, and for some reason, my TV upstairs occasionally it occasionally freezes. The one downstairs where I watch almost everything and where my office is and where I'm sitting right now, my TV is to my right. That does not freeze in any way. But DirecTV has this thing where you're watching and you're automatically watching HD. The old days you could watch the old stations, and then you had to know what the HD station was to switch. When you go to DirecTV, that doesn't happen. It's automatically on HD. But it offers a little box that says, would you like to watch this event in, I don't know what it says, but in a better production value? And you go, yes. And it switches over from channel 206, I believe, to channel 105, and it comes on. And maybe it's just my TV, which is about 7 years old, but it really didn't look like there was any better production value. But oddly enough, when I would do this, then for some reason I might switch stations to see watch the news for a second, maybe at halftime, and then I would switch back to the regular station at ESPN, and at first I'm like, what's going on? And they would show just the field and not see anything. And I would text my friends like, are you seeing this? You're only look. So the glitch was when you went to 105 to see the better production, so to speak, and then you switched back, it took you out of the game. And you could miss 5 minutes of the game, not even realize it, because at first you see the stadium, but it's just it's like what we're looking at here with Ohio State wins national titles, the photograph. Right. It was very strange. So I don't know if other people have had this experience, but I've had this several times, and it seems to be triggered by this decision to, hey, I'll take maybe it's 4K or something like that at 105. And whatever 4K is, I don't, whether it's my computer or my television, I have not noticed personally the difference between 4K and the HD that has become standard over the past 12 to 15 years. HD is what you see now.
Before I go to Logan with that, Stephen, real quick, did you leave to go to the local news, weather, sports, whatever it was, more than once? Or did after that first occasion, and when you got back in, I'm assuming you did, and you said, I'm not leaving again. Describe that experience real quick.
Yeah, well, remember, this was Inauguration Day, so there was a lot of news going on, which I'm interested in. So I was switching over to the news, and I was watching all the stuff that's going on with politics. So I was switching back and forth, both when I was upstairs and when I was downstairs, because I go upstairs to make dinner and I watch the game while I'm making dinner and what have you. So, and there's another thing that happens, I think, with DirecTV, although I think the old my old system, which was Comcast, did this as well. Some of this stuff is creepy. If I have the game on, or actually sometimes a movie, I don't see it with news, but you have a movie or you have a sporting event and you leave the room and you go upstairs and you come back and it's off my TV. The screen comes on with, we can't pick up a channel and you have to go back. And it's like it knows I'm not in the room, and, who knows what's going on with our phones and our televisions and our computers. Who we know that knows I'm not in the room. Who else knows I'm not in the room? It's Big Brother. And I'm not crazy about that. I mean, I don't particularly have anything to hide, but I also like my privacy. So I don't know if you guys have experienced these kinds of things and what your cable stations are, but those are some of my experiences.
Well, not only is Logan younger, but he's working in the industry, so obviously he would have a better take on. Logan, does Steven have ghosts watching after him, or are there cameras looking at him, watching him while he scratches during a game? And to give us a little insight about how technology is changing and going from one network to another, not just one station within that network, and getting back in. Is that a common problem?
Well, Steven, first off, I don't think you're on a hidden episode of Big Brother or anything like that. I don't think there's cameras around your house and your plants or anything. So I think you're good there.
Not yet, Logan. He's got to do something a little more exciting before they actually put him on the show.
You're right. You're right. Yeah. Maybe he's just on the live feeds because they never cut those, so they might just be editing it as we speak. But I don't know what might have been the reason there, Steve. I don't know. Maybe whenever it asked you to flip to that 105 channel or whatever it was, maybe that was like an on-air feed or a live feed directly into the game, and not necessarily like a Sports Center broadcast or anything along those lines. But I wasn't aware of that. I watched it on YouTube TV, so it might be different just based off of different platforms. Like you said, I know you said you had Comcast.
Yeah.
I'm sure other networks have maybe other packages or other channels along those lines. But I never got a pop-up saying, "Hey, would you like to upgrade your streaming performance and head over to watch it in 4K or whatnot?" I never got that, so that might just be a DirecTV exclusive type of deal.
You're right.
Yeah. Well, I've had to block Reggie White and Lawrence Taylor, and I can say, there's a certain fear that you have in going against someone like that, but I'm gone scared to change my channel sometime for the same reason, because I don't think that when I come back, I'm going to be able to do it immediately. I'm going to have to go right through the entrance and bypass Hulu or DirecTV or YouTube TV. There's so many different ways that we access information now. It's just overwhelming to someone here that hasn't taken the time. I'm not saying I'm not smart enough to do it, but if I'm like many guys, just show me what I need to do, and then let me get back on, and okay, I've got it. And don't change anything, or else I'm really going to get upset.
Well, I have to confess that in 1985, I applied to work at the Central Intelligence Agency. So maybe they've been following me ever since.
Taking notes on you.
Yeah, who knows?
Well, can we talk about that experience here on the show, or will you have to kill us?
Well, I could tell you, but then I'd have to. I'd have to take care of your situation with extreme prejudice.
Now, would the show also disintegrate? What was the Mission Impossible? This message will evaporate in the next. Yeah.
Well, or we'd have to do all the rest of our shows with the cone of silence. I don't know if Logan has any idea what I'm talking about, but Harper, I think you probably have seen some old episodes.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's some folks listening going, I wish you guys would do the cone of silence now and get to the point, all right? But so you enjoy the game. Now, here's one of the things. I just found this out before we went on the air. I'm going to read directly from an ESPN Associated Press story. It was the third lowest audience of the 11 college football playoff title games,
Hmm.
with all 3 occurring in the past 5 years. The audience peaked at 26.1 million in the second quarter, and that was when the game was tied at 7. And ever since Alabama's 26-23 overtime victory over Georgia in 2018, the past 7 title games have had an average margin of 25.4 points of victory for the winner. And that has hurt ratings a little bit. Is there also a portion of this ratings situation where there's so many games and you can't go to your wife, your girlfriend, or your significant other and go, no, honey, I promise only one more game, and then we get to the championship. So I'll get the dishes done a little bit later. How do most guys get to manage this?
Well, I think there's no question, because as far as these 2 programs, I mean, they are national programs with national basis, especially Notre Dame. But as you say, they've been playing a lot of football. You've got your conference title. You've got all your playoff games leading in. I mean, for Ohio State, they had to play in. They didn't get that bye. Neither did Notre Dame. So they've been on television a lot, and obviously all their games during the season are on TV. So yes, whether it's Ohio State or Notre Dame fans who cannot convince their wives or significant others not to watch, I don't know how. I think they pretty much all bulldoze their way through that situation. They're going to watch the game. But yeah, as far as the rest of the country, they've seen so many games that, but it's like anything else. It's like, let's say Major League Baseball. You can say, well, the ratings are down. But you know what? They play 162 regular season games, and Major League Baseball averages about 27,000 games per game, stretching from the Oakland A's and the Tampa Bay Rays all the way to the New York Yankees, Cardinals, and the Dodgers, who are drawing up between 47 and 53,000 per game.
Hold on, Stephen. You said 23,000 games, but did you mean 23,000 viewers or fans? Or go over that one more time. Give me that number again.
I believe Major League Baseball averages about 27 to 28,000 fans per game, regular season game. And that's a lot of games. So you can say, well, it's not as popular, but you know what? You got, let's say the Dodgers are drawing 45 to 50,000 fans for 81 regular season baseball games. And you compare that, let's say, to the Rams, who are probably drawing, 65,000 for 8 or 9 regular season football games. And then there's exhibition games and playoff games, just like there are in baseball. Baseball's doing pretty well. So, I mean, the point is, you just have so many games, and I'm sure that nobody's complaining about the total number of people who watched college football playoffs from the first week or from the conference title games to the end. It's an enormous amount of the world watched these games. So whether one individual game might be a little bit down, and maybe the game wasn't quite what they were hoping for, although it did get awfully good at the end. Still, I don't think anybody in the NCAA or the suites of ESPN or whoever else, I think WTBS cover some early games. There were some, I don't think ESPN had every single game. I'm not sure, but anyway, I think everybody.
TNT got some games.
TNT, well, they're connected with TBS. So I don't think anyone is really going to complain about viewership if you add everything up.
Logan, your thoughts in terms of just the numbers themselves, the amount of games. Does it need to be tweaked, or is it as good as it's going to get for the next couple of years?
I thought the only downside, Harper, and I mean, we mentioned it in the previews, that the fact it was on a Monday night, right? This wasn't a Saturday or Friday. So I think that probably hurt the viewership a little bit. The fact that, some people, I get it was a holiday that Monday for a lot of people, but people still had to go to work in on that Tuesday. So you couldn't stay up super late and watch the game. So I think that was If they could have played on a Saturday night, I feel like they would have gotten more viewers. But I'm not worried about the viewership. Like I said, I was surprised with the differential in the numbers that you mentioned, with the 25 points, 25 point something points in the last handful of games we've had. Which that's surprising. I thought it would be a lot closer, and it kind of puts in perspective with these two teams just how close it was in comparison to the other ones we've had.
Well, one of the next paragraphs begins with Georgia's 65-7 rout of TCU in 2023 was the least viewed title game. They had 17.2 million, followed by Alabama's 52-24 win over Ohio State in 2021. So they were just saying that at one point or another, the game was a blowout, and that's when they started to see the numbers go down in terms of the amount of people at that specific peak time. So very interesting how it works, but it was a double-digit drop from just last year. The Michigan game last year against Washington was more viewed than this more recent one. But again, it's just a little bit. There's more teams. There's a Monday night schedule. The NFL gave Monday night here, not gave, but basically said, hey, this is going to be open. We're not going to have a Monday night game. So interesting how these big dynamics all seem to play together well in the sand to try to make this the best case scenario for everybody. I'm sure college would say, no, give us Saturday night. That's it. And the NFL said, no, this Saturday, we're taking a primetime game. We're going to have one of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a big factor. And also, Stephen alluded to it earlier, it was kind of a triple threat, right? It was the inauguration. So a lot of people were focused more so on the political aspect of everything going on that day. To add on the fact that, it was Martin Luther King Day. Some people were out and enjoying their day off from federal holidays or whatnot. And like I said, I don't think that the final was an afterthought by any means, but there was so much other stuff going on that it did kind of pull away, I think, with everything else going on from the game a little bit.
Yeah. And then it
was Harper, a big day for J.D. Vance. He's an Ohio State graduate.
Yeah.
So
yeah, his whole day was pretty much taken up from morning till the break of day the next morning, I would imagine.
I bet you he finally managed to sit down and watch his Buckeyes.
Yeah.
He probably scurried off somewhere.
Unless he were the president, you really can't say it doesn't get much better than this. I mean, he can't argue about having, that day. My goodness, who would have thunk it? We don't have the numbers in terms of the breakdown per school. I had heard that it was going to be as much as $20 million. That may be way off. With viewership going down, I think the split will be very interesting. But a lot of folks are saying, okay, well, about the $20 million that Ohio State's going to get for playing in that game, well, that will justifiably pay off all the players. They're back at break even. Notre Dame, however, gets to keep all of that money and doesn't have to split any of it amongst another conference. So they're saying that's not fair. Another school like SC or Alabama, they will only get a small sliver of how that's broken down, but they can complain it's not fair. I don't think we're ever going to be able to split a pie where everybody is actually happy and says, boy, this is great. We should keep doing it this way. Stephen, first and foremost, your thoughts about how that is going to break down and then the trajectory that college football is in terms of how much they're going to have to pay in order to bring in some of these players to keep them happy and have to refund it and do it all over again the following year.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Paying these players and who's really paying for it? Supposedly they have these consortiums of alumni, but I don't really see that's where it's coming from. I think it's because they're being offered contracts basically through agents by coaches to come to play for their school. So I think those are coming from the school, one way or another, no matter how they're funneling it, no matter how they're laundering the money. Notre Dame, I mean, they've always, been unto themselves. They for many, many years, they didn't play other Catholic schools because they didn't want other Catholic schools to bask in the Catholic limelight that they had going. They've always had a great Subway alumni of a national fan base. The one thing I would say, and I've said this before, if you're talking about tweaking the system, is I don't think that the four, is it the 4 or 5? I think 4 of the conference champions automatically get a bye the first week. I don't think that should happen in the future. That being said, as we've talked about this at length, both in the pros and the colleges, and in baseball as well, it isn't necessarily the advantage. There really is something to be said for sort of carrying the momentum of victory from one week to the next. And even though coaches say, well, I want those 2 weeks so that I can prepare, it really has not shown itself to be a big advantage. But, I think overall, from a fan standpoint, as I've said before, it's a bonanza of football. What a weekend. You had the pros, you had the colleges, and a lot of little kids are watching. Now, Logan mentioned, it's a Monday night on the East Coast. And of course, you guys are on the East Coast, Harper, but you didn't grow up there. It's a whole different game out here on the West Coast. It's a much better viewership experience because the games are starting at 4:30 or 5, which is, and they're going to be over by 8:30 or 9, and everybody can watch it. And, as a kid, you can watch it. Game comes on, at 8:30 on the East Coast, and it's going to go till 12, 1 in the morning, and you got school the next day. Even if you want to stay up, a lot of times you're going to fall asleep, or you've got to work the next day. That's difficult. But boy, there really do seem to be an awful lot of wealthy people out there who seem to be able to travel and pay any amount of money that they want and stay in any hotel that they want to see their Buckeyes or their Irish or their Wolverines or their Bama Crimson Tide. I remember when I was interviewing people for my book on USC Alabama, and even then they were still sort of claiming poverty. Oh, we're the poor kids. USC was the rich kids and we're the poor kids, and they were still almost kind of using that. But I don't see that anymore. Certainly, even though Alabama was not in it this year, their fan base travels very nicely, thank you. No matter how many playoff games and conference title games and championship games they play, no matter where the game is, when they played at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, 3,000 miles away, that place was packed. And I remember when I've been at the Rose Bowl to see USC and sometimes Michigan, there are just as many Buckeye fans or just as many Texas fans or just as many Michigan fans as there are for the so-called local team. So, it's an extravaganza, and the fans are loving it.
Well, Logan, are you going to dip into the piggy bank that you got there that you have saved forever? My son had a big Crayola crayon. It was a life-size thing. It was about 3 feet, and he would put nickels, dimes, and quarters in that. I still don't think that would be enough to be able to get a ticket for the national championship game. But talk a little bit about just the funding of this specific team, and then how you got to do it again all over next year. You got to come up with another $15-20 million to be able to do it all over again, or at least have the opportunity to. Is that going to be an easy thing for the NCAA to monitor?
No, it's going to be even tougher, I think, with the amount of transfer people. We saw a whole team leave pretty much in Marshall. Was it 35, 36 some odd players plus their coach? They had to forfeit a bowl game because they didn't have enough players on the roster. Now, granted, we're not going to see that from the major teams, like Ohio State's and Notre Dame's and Georgia's. You're not going to see that. But, just the way that kids are leaving schools now after half a season, maybe even one season, if they don't get any playing time, they're done for. They say, all right, no, I can go play somewhere else and get some playing time. I know it's a mess behind the scenes, And then, like you said, you got to throw money in there too, right? These kids sign deals for, whether it be for cars, whether it be for your local restaurant up the street, or, you know, a brand name watch, whatever the hundreds and thousands of different deals are. It's a lot to go into it. And like we said, and like we've been saying, they're not really student athletes anymore. They're more just, you know, they're in the world of business. They're more growing up as adults than ever now at, you know, 18, 19, 20. And, you know, so they have to be responsible, not just with their studies, not just with being good on the field, but also now even more so financially. Because normally you go to college, you don't have to worry about managing millions of dollars and whatnot. You have to worry about if I'm going to have enough food to skip out and live off ramen for a week, or if I can go and get something nice from the store. That's how it usually is, but not with a lot of these major programs. So it's tough, I think. If you're an athletic director, tip my hat to y'all, because, man, that's probably one of the toughest jobs in the world right now, is figuring out, not just for, I know we all talk about football, obviously, but this is for other sports too. That's your whole sport. All your sport programs are going through this in some degree. And it's just it's juggling it every single day and trying to manage it. It's tough.
Yeah, Stephen, I would agree. First and foremost, ramen. And then, did you ever have Rice Krispies and water? I've been there. When you're as broke as the Ten Commandments at a small school, you got filet mignon every night, didn't you, Stephen? While you were at SC.
Well, I actually did try to have decent food. I was on a meal plan like my first semester, and then I said, okay, I'm going to get off that, and I remember some friends would come in and they'd look in my refrigerator and they'd, hey, you've got steaks and chickens, you know. And so I would have, people would come to my house during my college years because they knew I could cook and I'd have food for them. But speaking about the rules, like I had a friend whose son was at SC, and he roomed with, I think it was Tommy Malone, who was an All-American punter. And my friend was down in Los Angeles at the time, and Tommy had to fly home, I think for, Christmas or something. And my friend was saying, oh, I'll give you a ride to the airport. And one of the coaches goes, no. You can't give him a ride to the airport. Just a ride to the airport was at that time a breaking NCAA rules for this guy, my friend Bruce, who had no official title with the school other than being a season ticket holder and paying tuition for his son. And he had gone to SC and he was a fan, but he, was he a booster? I mean, anybody who gives a few bucks to the school, are they a booster and they can't, buy a meal for a kid, even if it's your son's roommate? That's just a friendship. But that was a situation then that I don't think exists today.
Yeah, I remember when I first got to Colorado State, the CU Buffaloes had boosters. I believe it was Marriott Hotels, Hertz Rent-A-Car, and Continental Airlines, which was the hub. Denver was the hub for Continental, or one of their hubs. And so part of the recruiting package would be Chuck Fairbanks or one of the coaches could come into your home and say, Mr. and Mrs. Travers, Mr. and Mrs. Landers, we'd love to have your son Logan here at the University of Colorado. And to make sure that you're able to see each one of his games, we'll have 2 tickets waiting for you at the airport. We'll have a hotel room for you and a car wherever you want to go. Now, who wouldn't want to be a part of that? Now, that was obviously outlawed. But for you to have a friend get in trouble with the NCAA because he wants to give you a ride to the airport that you're going to have to get anyways, what do you have to do? Go buy a car and then fill it up with gas and then drive to the airport, park, pay for the parking when you come back in a week, and then sell the car with the full tank of gas. Sometimes the rules just were so badly violated by some that it ruined it for everybody else. I think everyone would be in agreement that the NCAA kind of overwent their bounds in many different areas in terms of the rules and regulations.
Hey, was Colorado State is that in Fort Collins, Colorado? It
was and still is. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. I lived there.
It's a great town.
I lived in Fort Collins in the summer of 1978. playing for a team in the Colorado State Collegiate Summer League called the Colorado Springs Merchants. Pikes Peak, it was right under Pikes Peak. And we played our games where the Colorado Blue Sox, I think AAA team, where Goose Gossage had once pitched. I don't think they were AAA anymore, but we played our beautiful stadium. And that was a beautiful place to spend a summer.
Yeah, great summer. About 4:02 every day, the thunderstorms would come over,
and then hail
for the rest of the day. You were loving it. But we'll talk about that.
Down with baseballs, they breaking windshields. It was insane.
Yeah, I bet you had a hard time keeping the ball in the park there while you were pitching that summer.
I didn't get a lot of pitching action that summer. We had a really good. I was really young. I was like, not even a freshman yet, and so I was on this team. It's a long story how this summer played out. I don't have time to tell it to you. Maybe in one of our future episodes.
We'll talk about
crazy story, but we had some really good pitchers on that team. One guy from SDSU, another guy from University of Nebraska, Omaha. And so I didn't get a lot of pitching time, but I did get clocked at 90 miles an hour pitching in a super hot day in Dodge City, Kansas, which was that was, I remember that, like, oh man, I got clocked at 90. So maybe I'm getting it up there.
Did you have that guy in the back of Dodger Stadium who wore the hat and the blue vest?
That's what in those days, that situation has changed. Also, as an aside, I used to clock the starters when I was in the Cardinals organization. And one day I clocked the knuckleball pitcher at 105. And I either caught a car on the freeway past the stadium or possibly a plane. But I used that information to talk my way out of at least 2 tickets, with CHP officers over the years, when I said, those machines you're using are not completely reliable. And
right.
I explained why, the officers looking, oh my God, I've got an expert on machines on these radar guns is going to be in front of the judge, detailing exactly his experience on how. I'm not going to give you the ticket. Or I think one time a guy was on the grapevine heading back from LA, and I got to give you something, but instead of 75, I'll cut it down to 70 or something. Instead of 85, I'll cut it down to 70 or something like that.
Well, yeah, we'll talk about radar detection calibration on another show. You did mention Dodge City, Kansas. Let's make a switch here real quick and talk a little bit about the NFL playoffs. Kansas City, of course, isn't in Dodge City, but not that far away. First and foremost, Stephen, your thoughts about the Chiefs. They've obviously got the Bills. They took care of business with Houston last week, and now they get to host, really, between them and Baltimore. I thought it would be the Ravens, but this is going to be one of those games where it has the possibility, especially as a AFC championship game, to go down as one of the classics.
Well, I am going with the Bills. I think, as we've talked before about what makes a team great, and I used as one example out of many the 72 Dolphins. Hey, why were you more fired up in 72? Because we lost in 71. So here are the Bills, and this is like a historical story with the Bills, but it applies to last season. They came within an inch of beating the Chiefs last year. And that has been on their mind all season. And I don't know whether they're putting things up on their scorebooks in the locker room, but they've got to be fired up. They have Josh Allen, who is close to being the most valuable player in the NFL.
Yeah.
Had a stellar season. He came into his own like never before. He was already really good, but he had a really outstanding year. Mahomes is a Hall of Fame quarterback. Kelsey is a Hall of Fame tight end. They have the marquee guys. So from a personal standpoint, we talked earlier about my trip to Buffalo, And my friend Terry and his friend Bill, who are both from Rochester, which is near Buffalo, the Great Lakes Buffalo region. And they said, your daughter has moved to Vermont and you are thinking about buying property. I think you and your Raiders have moved to Las Vegas. It's time for you to just up and say you are now a Buffalo Bills fan. So I'm going to personally make this announcement. The Buffalo Bills are my team. I'm rooting for them to beat the Kansas City Chiefs in the title game, and I think they're going to do it. I think that they are used to playing in cold weather. That's not going to be an issue. I saw them play in the snow, and they were making all their cuts. So I think it's going to be a shootout between Allen and Mahomes, and Allen and Mahomes, and I'm going to go with Allen and the Bills to break up the Kansas City monopoly.
Well, how about that, Logan? We hear the announcement. He makes it on our national broadcast here, where he's in the Bills Mafia. Once again, you can tell us, but you'd have to kill us, just like in the CIA. What did you have to do to get into the Bills Mafia? I'm sure there are, skeletons somewhere that you'll have to, wearing either Ravens or Jets gear, right? You gotta burn your Patriot jersey in order to get in. I would think that would be an initiation, but you're not alone in terms of thinking the Bills have it. Is he, Logan?
No, he's not. And also, I think too, Steven, if you ever want to go pregame for a Bills game that's not in the snow that you were in, I think you have to join Bills Mafia. You got to get slammed through a table or something. I see all the pregame videos they do out there in the parking lot, and my best of luck to you, my friends. just a word of warning. But no, I think that we brought up the other day, Harper, that I like the momentum that the Bills are on right now. Obviously, we know they're undefeated. They haven't lost a home game all season, so they were doing great in that regard. They took care of business last week against the Ravens. They got luck on their side, obviously, with the unfortunate drops with Mark Andrews, the fumbles. So they managed to get all that and couple it all together and get a win, which, I mean, hey, sometimes you need a little bit of luck on your side to move forward in the playoffs and in the NFL. But it's a scary Chiefs team, right? We know that they have a top-tier defense. That's been their calling card for the last really 2 seasons. It's not their offense, it's more so their defense. I mean, Patrick Mahomes had a down year, which it was still a really good season. It's just a down year for him. And Vincent brought up a good point yesterday that Travis Kelce hasn't looked, you say he's a little bit older, right? He's not in his prime years anymore, but he had the best game of the season last week in their win against Houston. So that proves that, hey, it's kind of like Gronkowski in recent years that, yeah, they might be a little bit older, but they can still, flip that switch and let go and just look 5 years younger, 10 years younger in the playoffs when it really matters the most. So obviously that's a great connection there. So I like Buffalo. I said in their preview against the Ravens that if Buffalo wants a chance at winning and continuing to win and keep moving, it can't just all be on Josh Allen, right? It has to be the running game. James Cook had, I believe, a little bit under 70 yards last week against Baltimore. Not a bad game, but not the 100+ he had the week prior. So I think that if you can have a substantial running game, we know Allen can run if he needs to. He can step up in the pocket. He's a burly guy, so he can lower the boom if he needs to. He can dive in at the pylon for a touchdown too. So something you need to watch out for with him. But I like this team, that they're good on defense as well. They're gritty. They've got just a lot of solid players on both ends of the spectrum. And look, I think they're due, right? This has been their arch nemesis for many, many years now. Casey's been to this game 7 years in a row, which is, it's hard to believe that it's gone by that quick, but also they've been dominant for that long. And we've been saying for many years now, Buffalo, it's your time to shine, right? This is your year. It's time to put up or shut up. And, I feel like the more and more we've talked about that over the years here on the show and whatnot, that it's like, man, we gotta do something now. It feels like a now or never type situation. So I'll go Buffalo winning this one on the AFC side, pulling off the I guess you could say the upset, because I mean this is a team in Kansas City who's looking to make history, right, guys, and make the first ever three-peat NFL history. So it's going to be a great game. We know that both these coaches are going to have their teams ready for war, and Sean McDermott, Andy Reid, the chess match once again. We'll see who comes out on top, but I'll give the slight edge to Buffalo on this one, though. So I'm with you, Steven.
Yeah, it's interesting how this turns out. Is this another year where always the bridesmaid and never the bride? For my comparison, it would be to the Raiders teams back in the late 60s. You had to beat a very good Kansas City team. They had to beat the Dolphins. They had to beat the Colts. They had to beat the Steelers. They had to beat everybody until finally they got their chance. And then they get one in the 70s when they beat the Vikings there for their first Super Bowl championship. And then they got a couple in the 80s. But that's what this reminds me of in terms of the experience at Buffalo. Gosh, what do we need to do to get over that hump? Because Kansas City just seems, when they have to be unbeatable. And they end up playing like it too. It doesn't matter if it's 1 point or 30. They find a way to win. Let's move over to the NFC game. We'll talk about one that here's who expected the Commanders to be in this game, Stephen. And Jaden Daniels has played crazy good. So has everybody else around him. But I think the Eagles, especially at home with their fans, with the Philly cheesesteaks, with maybe something cold to drink, and the field with that offensive line. The defense played absolutely outstanding. If Jalen Hurts just has a above average game, I think the Eagles basically come away with this one. Give me your thoughts.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. The Commanders, I don't know what to say about that victory over the Lions. Were the Lions looking ahead? It's possible. They got close last year and didn't make it, and they were looking ahead to this monumental Mahomes-Goff matchup. Jared played well, put some points on the board, but we talked earlier about injuries with Detroit and a lot of injuries on defense, and they just couldn't stop Daniels, and they couldn't stop the Commanders. And you score 40 points. That's a big ask of your offense in professional football. So it was a tough loss for the Detroit Lions and their fan base, this wonderful fan base that they had. Have been so fired up with Jared's performance and with the team's performance over the past few years, his desultory NFL franchise that hadn't won anything since Frank Lane or Bobby Lane in 1957. So, but you got to hand it to Washington, and that's another fan base. That's an interesting fan base, and of course, that's a halfway political fan base. So I wonder if half their fan base was employed during the course of that game, and now they're not because the deep state is being broken up in Washington, D.C. They have to move out of Virginia and back to their hometowns, but we won't get into that. So now, then you've got the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm a big fan of Jalen Hurts ever since he came in to the Alabama game that I saw him play at Texas in 2016, and immediately made some fantastic passes, some of which were right below me from where I was sitting. And he really was an outstanding college quarterback, although he lost his job to Tagovailoa, but went to OU and continued playing at a very high level. He is there's some great quarterbacks, as we've mentioned, in the NFL. And you were talking about the 60s was another period. You had Joe Namath, Darryl LaMonica, Len Dawson, Fran Tarkenton, Bob Greasy. You get into Terry Bradshaw, Kenny Stabler. This is kind of a similar period in the NFL with a lot of really good quarterbacks. This culture of quarterbacks being tutored from a very early age, identified at a young age and tutored we're seeing those guys now are NFL veterans because this has been going on for a long time, and there's some really good ones. And I'm a big fan of Hurts. I think he's very close to being a Hall of Fame type player. He wins a Super Bowl. He's already had some championship years. This is a game that he's playing for. He's probably not thinking this way, but I think his legacy, because he's, all these other quarterbacks we've talked about at length, and he's right up there with them. Now, Saquon Barkley, holy cat's meow. I'm looking at him last week running in the snow, and Harper, you're old enough to remember this, and I'm seeing O.J. Simpson in the snow at Shea Stadium rushing for 200-plus yards to set the 14-game NFL record and the first man ever to get 3,000 yards. And Barkley running in the snow last week, Hall of Famer, a second chance after his previous team, I wouldn't say gave up on him, but, he's not with them anymore. So that Eagles team, there is a club, and we've been talking a lot about the AFC because there's a lot of talent, and we say maybe it's a better league, but this Eagles team has everything it takes, both offensively, defensively, passing and running, to go all the way. So I like them.
Yeah, a lot of different reasons to support them, but I think, Logan, you're gonna say nope. The Commanders, I love the way they hit defensively. They're stout. They've got a quarterback that doesn't know what the word no means. He can do everything, and he tries it. They got a great receiving core in terms of their tight end and wide receivers. They can run the ball well, plus with their quarterback. So there's a lot of reasons to like the Commanders, isn't there?
No, there definitely is, man. I mean, I'm sure we've all seen the many quotes going on around Jaden Daniels rather in the last week, but it feels like all season long. Everyone says, he's just a rookie, but just in age alone, right? That everyone seems to love his demeanor. He's already got that fearless leadership as a rookie, which is a tremendous trait to have. And it seems like the team around him in Washington obviously believes in him. He's getting it done. He's making the big throws. And I don't mean just big throws in terms of, moments, but I mean long, deep throws. He's connecting with great accuracy. He has that clutch gene, and the city, like you said, all of DC's behind him. They have a tremendous coaching staff and Dan Quinn, who I'm glad that, he's getting a lot more love now after, the what all happened in Atlanta, as we all know, many years ago. And he went to Dallas and a couple other, did well over there as a coordinator, but he's done great with this team, right? Got him their first playoff win in 20 seasons as an upset in round one. Moving on here, like they beat the number 1 seed in the Detroit Lions. I get that, they were banged up, but they were banged up pretty much all year, it felt like. But still not a lot of people picked them to win that game. I picked Detroit to win that game, so they shocked me. They shocked a lot of other people. Also, it was in Detroit, too, so they beat them at home. And like you mentioned, they put up 45 points against a really good team. So that shows that their offense is elite, right? We know Daniels, we know Robinson in the back. Terry McLaurin's done great work this year. Dami Brown as well has been an emerging wide receiver on this team who's done some good work. And then for the defense, like I mentioned the other day, they have a lot of veterans, right? With Lattimore and Wagner, just to name a few, who are that good veteran leadership. And to help you in the locker room when, say if you're down by a score or two, say, hey, guys, don't worry, we'll pick you up. We'll stuff them here. Offense, we need you to turn around and get some points so we can just keep rolling, get back in the fight. And they've been doing that pretty much all season. And that's a credit to everyone, whether it be from the new owner down, in terms of just how they've been able to turn a franchise who picked number 2 in the draft just a handful of closing in on a year now. And now that they're one of the top 4 teams in the NFL, the turnaround for this team has been tremendous in such a short amount of time. Jaden Daniels jerseys are flying off the shelves, I'm sure, but this is going to be a good matchup, I think. But for me, me and Steven, we didn't plan this beforehand, I swear, but I like the Eagles in this one. I think that Saquon is just, I don't know if anyone can stop him. He's just been on a different level this year. I think he's playing with that chip on his shoulder since New York gave up on him for nothing. Also, they said, hey, we'll let you walk. So he's had something to prove all year. And he's running aggressive. He's not just, I'll juke you out your shoes. No, he's not afraid to stiff arm some guy and take him down with him. So I like that. And I think, like I said, Jalen Hurts has had good performances, right? He hasn't had in the postseason this year that one, 300-yard performance or he throws for 5 touchdowns or whatever, but he doesn't need to. If your running game is doing so good, you don't have to do that. I think that they will have to rely a little bit more on Hurts in this game. I like that Washington defense. They have a really good D-line. They have good linebackers as well. So I think they might have to rely on Jalen a little bit more. But we mentioned it the other day, the receiving core of A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert out there in Philadelphia. They got to step up. They got to, make the big catches. You can't have any drops this week. You got to get involved because we're getting to the nitty-gritty. Only 4 teams left. This is a chance to go back to the Super Bowl for Philly, hopefully win another title. You're facing a very hungry team with really nothing to lose in Washington. So it's going to be a great game, I think, but I'll give the slight edge to Philly. Like I said, they're at home. There's going to be hot dog wrappers. There's going to be some cold beverages flowing through their veins. So it's going to be an electric crowd, and that they're waiting to see their team go back to the Super Bowl. So I'll go Philly in this one.
Well, those hot dog wrappers are specifically designed for Washington Commander fans that want to go into the link and dare wear their colors or cheer for their team. So it'll be in the back of the head that you'll experience that wrapper. I know first and foremost it will happen. 3:00 on Fox. Philadelphia is a 6-point favorite at home. They're 13-4 in the year. 12-5 is Washington, and the Commanders go in, and they will be playing for the 3rd time this year in that 3:00 kickoff. The other game, obviously, at 6:30, CBS will host that one. Stephen will be wondering whether he can watch that one, and they'll still tune in to Meet the Press later on in the day, but we'll find out about that on our next show. 13-4 was Buffalo this year, 15-2. So it's not just the records, guys. It's really who's going to be the hottest team at the right time. And that works in any sport, hockey, basketball, baseball, of course. You go with the guy with the hot arm, the guy who's at the plate, and if he can hit the ball at this particular time in the year, no matter what the weather is, that's the real cool thing about it. But a couple of great games. Before we go, Stephen, we wanted to give you a chance. You're wearing your USC colors. You've got an old jersey on that you used to have when you were on the first or third base baselines when you were coaching. We're going to have you give a couple of coaching remarks about Woody Marks, the running back out of USC, potential draft pick. Give us a basic lowdown about Woody and what are some of the reasons why he should be very impressive to the scouts and work his way towards the combine and hopefully have a great draft experience.
Well, Vincent wanted me to look into Woody, sees him as a player who will be drafted. I don't know how high. It was a disappointing season for the Trojans, but Woody had a good year. He's typical of a lot of players in college football. He's a redshirt senior, 5'10", 208. He's out of your area. He's out of Carver High School in Atlanta or in the Atlanta area.
Yep.
He originally started at Mississippi State. He had 4 years there. He had 410 carries and a 4.6 average with a long of 52 yards when he was with the Bulldogs. He was a skilled running back who transferred to USB in the spring of 2024. And he had a good year at USC this season. As a junior at Mississippi State, he rushed for 113 yards in 502 attempts. And he was a big-time 4-star recruit coming out of high school. He was the number 138 player in the nation by 24/7 Sports and 153 by ESPN, ranked as the 11th best prospect by Rivals. So he lived up to his high school prowess at the collegiate level, and this season had 198 yards and 198 attempts and 1,133 yards for 9 touchdowns. He seems to break tackles. He's pretty good in the open field. SC, it's a funny thing about their season. They opened the season. They beat Louisiana State in a game that was played in Las Vegas. Then they went to the Big House, and they had Michigan beaten. And Woody played a great game against the Wolverines, and they played some catch-up football. Miller Moss had a really good game that day, and I'll talk about him in a second. But Woody had a good day. I don't know how many yards he gained. I don't have that in front of me, but he helped the Trojans rally from 14-0 down to take a lead. And it really looked like they were going to beat the the Michigan Wolverines. And then there was a missed tackle at the end of the game, and Michigan was able to get down and score and beat USC. And that changed the entire complexion of SC's season. They were an unbeaten team going into that game. They would have been unbeaten. USC, until they got to the Notre Dame game, was within a score at the end of the game of being undefeated. And yet they had 6 losses on the season. 5 of those were games they could have won. And if they had won that Michigan game, it might have been an entirely different year. And it might have been a much different season for Miller Moss as well. I was impressed with Miller Moss. Now he's not going to be in the draft this year, but I think he has skills that might translate to the pro level. I'm not talking necessarily about being a starter as a rookie or being a great star, but a guy like Rob Johnson, who was another Trojan who got into the league and eventually made his mark with the Buffalo Bills after they had their period where they'd won 4 straight AFC championships but lost in the Super Bowl. So I think Woody is a player who's doesn't have tremendous size, but he's got some pretty good speed, and I think he's a guy to look for in the future. And we were talking a little bit about the pros and how this translates into professional football. We were talking about veterans, and, this reminds me of the late 60s and 70s, and Harper, you had brought this up earlier. What happens when you have a veteran team? And that was what Washington is in this. And that's what the Washington Redskins were. They were a veteran team. The Dolphins, the Raiders, all those teams generally won with quarterbacks who bided their time and sat on the bench for 3-4 years before they got their start. Dawson took years. Kenny Stabler, LaMonica, they all took their time to get in there. And then one last remark, which is not based on your question, but we were talking about Oakland. Now, I haven't been to every stadium. You guys have been to stadiums in the South. In my humble opinion, the best, and Logan was mentioning, the pregame tailgate in Buffalo. In my humble opinion, the best tailgate is at the old Oakland Coliseum, which is no more. It's not an A's tailgate. It's not a Raiders tailgate, but it was a great tailgate scene. They had a lot of room there for parking and a lot of room to be able to set up trays and a lot of good sausages and bratwurst and a lot of beer from some real blue-collar fans.
Well, I will tell you a quick story. If you remember Bobby Moore, who changed his name to Ahmad Rashad, wide receiver out of Oregon, started his NFL career as a St. Louis Cardinal, football Cardinal.
Married to
Don Coryell was the head coach, and Don said on all of our trips, we are going to look like St. Louis Cardinals. We're going to wear some sort of red. You could be your tie, it could be your shirt, it could be the jacket that you have. We want you to look professional when you travel on the team. And so they're doing a preseason game against the Oakland Raiders, and the game was in Oakland. And they come from the airport, they go to the hotel, they spend the night there. It's a night game, so they spend most of the day, at a couple of meetings, staying off their feet. And when they take the bus to get to the stadium, there they are, all dressed up, coat and tie, have a little suitcase with your change of clothes that you have with you. You get off of the bus, and before the bus pulls up right into the the pit is what you would call it, where all the buses transferring, whether it be television equipment or the players themselves, all of the gear was in this one place, and they would let the guys out. Well, right before that is in the stadium grounds, just to the side is where the Raiders parking lot was. And all these guys pull in and they look over, and the Raiders are in the lot. There's a bunch of motorcycles. There's a bunch of hot rods.
That's the scene.
Guys that are wearing jeans, and they've got biker boots on, and they've got mustaches, and they've got leather jackets or sleeve jackets where muscles are coming out, and long hair, and girls with tank tops and blue jeans next. And he said, Ahmad says, we get off the bus, and we're looking out, and it looks like we're going to enter Alcatraz. We look like there's the prison right there, and we look like Carnation ice cream salesmen with our coat and tie. Welcome to Oakland, the Alameda Coliseum, right? And the Raiders were certainly something special back in those days. Thank you for allowing me to tell that quick little story.
Yeah, you captured it. That's exactly the scene. It's half Hell's Angels and half bikini contest. And it smelled so good. I mean, and plenty, and you could just walk up to these guys and say, hey, can I get a beer? Sure. Go Raiders. And the A's tailgate scene.
I'll trade you a beer for a Camel filterless, right? You got a light?
Yeah, well, as I wrote my book on the history of the Raiders, my favorite chapter was Hunter Thompson inculcated himself into the Raider culture in '73 and spent a half a season with them and traveled with them and was with them and went to all these dive bars. With a lot of these bars aren't there anymore, but Oakland had dive bars. It's an old seafaring town, and it had these great bars up and down the waterfronts and into San Leandro and Hayward. And it's a true blue collar scene. It is not like the sort of wine and rosé scene you get over it in San Francisco. And that was a tailgate scene. I mean, there's tailgates. That's a whole story. The one I want to see someday, I don't know if either one of you have ever been there, is the tailgate scene at a Mississippi State baseball game. I've heard that's a legendary event. So,
well, if it's more so than the Orchard, which is a part of Ole Miss, I played my senior year. We played at Starkville, but we'll tell those stories in a little bit. Let's save them for another time. Logan, before we finish today, give me your final thoughts here. You've got the end of college football. You've got playoffs. You've got the draft coming up. Give us your perspective.
Yeah, sad that college football games are over. What a great season it was. Capped off by a really good game with two historic schools going at it in a really good competitive matchup there in the second half. And once again, congratulations to the Ohio State Buckeyes taking home another national championship you can add to your impressive collection already. But that means it's time, like you said, we already did a little preview today, but we're talking a lot about the draft, getting geared up for that mid-April day, and it's going to be fun talking about all the different prospects from a lot of the major schools, but also some of the smaller schools that you might not have ever heard of. We did a couple yesterday. We did a young man out of Sacramento State, which honestly, Harper, I didn't even know that they even had a football program until I got the lineup. So we're all learning out here about all these different players and schools. So I always love the draft time, but like I said, we still got some NFL action this weekend. Two great games. Going to be seeing who goes to the Super Bowl, and then we got a little bit of hype around that, and then it'll be the Super Bowl in New Orleans, which that's going to be a party. That's going to be a fun time, but we got to get there first. Great games this weekend. I'm excited for it, and football's still rolling here, so we're at high energy right now.
Yeah. Well, Stephen, your final thoughts. Please don't include the dive bar with either a single pool table with one of the two lights not working correctly, dart board that's over in the corner. Does it also have a black light with a little artwork on the wall with the felt art that lights up with the black light and some Elvis display of some sort? Let's avoid that for another show, but give us your final thoughts here for the Take 5 show that we have with you.
Yeah, well, those you're describing something that's close to my heart.
And how much smoke smoke outside? Never, my friend. It's never going to happen.
Yeah. I could tell you about dive bars in Germany, dive bars in California, LA, San Francisco, Oakland, various places, Reno. But yes, okay. So what strikes me at the end of this season is Ohio State's 9th national championship, and I believe they have 6 Heisman trophies. And I wrote a book in 2006 called The USC Trojans, College Football's All-Time Greatest Dynasty. And at that time, I believe that they had reached a point where they were the greatest program in the history of collegiate football. They had gotten to 11 national titles. They had 7 Heisman trophies at that point. They had the most bowl wins, the most bowl games, the most Rose Bowl titles, the most pro football players, the most first-round draft picks. I think they had the most number 1 picks. All this metrics that at that time I used to determine that they had passed, let's say, Alabama and Notre Dame for that. And a lot has happened since then. Alabama, which was about tied with them at the time for the most national titles, has just run away with it. I think they're up to 18. So there's no question about Alabama. And now here comes the Ohio State Buckeyes. They're at 9 national titles, and that's only 2 away from the Trojans' 11. And theirs are more recent, more modern, and harder earned, let's face it, because it's in a playoff atmosphere that USC, for the most part, did not face. So Ohio State is at the point where you need to say, well, they're probably the second all-time greatest, or really close to being the second all-time greatest collegiate football program of all time. And that's really a heck of a statement to say, just like you could say LSU is getting closer to USC's 11 baseball national championships. And of course, theirs are more modern and harder earned. So maybe LSU is now the top baseball program of all time. That's an argument you can make, but that's where I see Ohio State. That's a lot of national titles, 9 national titles. And I don't see them dropping off in the near future.
Well, we want to congratulate Ohio State and Notre Dame for giving us a game that was worth watching. Maybe not in the same abundance as some of the others, but certainly Notre Dame coming from behind and trying to make it a 1-score game there at the very end. Couldn't ask for much more from the Irish, but congratulations to Ohio State, their coaching staff, their organization in terms of athletic department, and the players, of course, so and their fans. But we wanted to go over that, a little bit of NFL action. We did a little bit of scouting, and we went into a couple of dive bars. So that's where we have been here today on Take 5 with Stephen Travers. And we want to thank Stephen for being a part of the show. Obviously, Logan Landers, our producer and engineer, for putting all of this together. We appreciate all of it. And we thank you for tuning in as well with 100 yards of football with the brand here taking off in different directions. We appreciate you being a part of the show. So that's it for today's show of Take 5 with Stephen Travers. Hope you have a fantastic day, everybody. We wish you the best.